Hi everyone, welcome back to part 3. In this final section of today's lecture, what I'm going to do is to focus on the spaces, the walls, the lights, all of those things that pretend to be invisible that make up the gallery. So far we've thought about and looked at the social and cultural history of the museum and art gallery, how we got to these kinds of spaces, and the kinds of value that they hold in society. But what I want to do now is to sort of challenge that, and I want you to think about the things that we never think about, the things that are constantly pretending and trying to be invisible inside the gallery space. Someone who did this very early on was Marcel Duchamp, who during the first Papers of Surrealism exhibition in 1942 installed this installation of 200 miles of string, challenging what exactly a gallery was and what kinds of spaces the gallery occupied. Now, what's really interesting about this exhibition is it seems to be 3 or 4 things going on at once. We have the miles and miles of string, but we also have these flat boards upon which the art is displayed. Inside this space that is opulent and over-contrived, you can sort of see there's curtaining, there's frescoes, there's something on the roof, there's all these things going on. There's like 3 or 4 different gallery spaces happening at once. What started to happen is more and more all of these extra things became removed from the gallery, and we ended up with spaces that were pure and white. Now, this was done for a very particular reason, and I want to take you through some of the discussions that surround that shift towards a space that claims to be no space. A space that claims to be invisible, that claims to have no value, to accord no additional meaning or sense to the artworks. The person who's really helped us to think this idea through is a person called Brian O'Doherty or Patrick Ireland. He went by both names. O'Doherty, when he was writing as an art critic, wrote a very important book called Inside the Whitecube that you can still find, and you'll be able to find copies of this online as well. And Inside the Whitecube, in this book, O'Doherty looks at the structures and ideologies of the gallery space. What he argued was that it's the gallery space itself that starts to change and challenge what contemporary art can be and will be. His own art also operated within this space. So this is a work by Patrick Ireland, in 1973, which is so clearly early in this kind of history of contemporary art, with an idea of drawings in the air. And hopefully you have a relic of that Duchamp image I just showed you, and you can feel the spatial concerns are very similar. Ireland's drawings in the air is again string works that stretch across the space, but also all the walls of the gallery are painted according to certain sight lines and perspectives. So we end up with the sense of an activated space, of the gallery not being invisible or innocent or sort of closing its eyes to the other things that are going on. Instead, the space is active, we start to think and feel in different ways, and the walls start to shift and move. Now, when O'Doherty took this into his critical thought, he was really interested in the way that we argued that art galleries should operate. So this is a page from the book. The outside world must not come in, so windows are usually sealed off. Walls are painted white. The ceiling becomes the source of light, and in this context, a standing ashtray becomes almost a sacred object. Now, again, the time of the writing is really important here. This is a time when one would have standing ashtrays in the gallery, because where else would you put your ash? So you can see in this photograph he's captured here, there's the paintings, there's 3 of them, they're large, significant works. But actually what we see more of is the walls, the air conditioning ducts, the lighting, the strange structures on the ceiling, and this single ashtray standing against a wall all of its own. Doherty was interested in the ways that the galleries tried to hide these assumptions that they were making about space, and the different ways that we played along with this. That actually we also chose to not think about the white space, to not contest the social and cultural aesthetics of the space. Doherty wanted artists to start to challenge and question these very walls. And so for him, works like this, which is a photograph of the artworks being removed, were critically important as a way to challenge the institutional structures of the art gallery. He says the wall itself became the locus of contending ideologies. And everything that you put into an art gallery has to contend with the wall, the light switches, the little stand at the side. So works that he particularly championed were ones like this one that took an image of the wall and condensed it down and put a smaller mimetic image of the wall on top of the wall. And this was what he thinks is interesting. This is kind of a key dialogue for modernity. Now, how do we bring that forward into contemporary art, and in particular into the contemporary spaces that we're having to work in and with at the moment? The point of O'Doherty's work is that the gallery is not a neutral container, but actually is a historical construct. So all these things I've talked about so far, the politics of collecting, the politics of taxonomy, the different ways that we understand how spaces work and operate, these are all contributing to the aesthetics of the art gallery and the aesthetics of the objects contained within it. After modernism, what starts to happen is that the white cube, a phrase or a context from modernism, continues to dominate and operate inside contemporary art. Or as they say in this article on eFlux that I've given you to read before today's lecture, the gallery is inseparable from the artworks exhibited inside it. So both the art gallery and the artworks are working together inside these structures of power, collecting, authority, all these sort of things that we're carrying through from the histories of collecting and the histories of colonial collecting. All these things are returning once again as we engage with the white gallery. The very whitest gallery space I've ever stood in is the Saatchi Gallery in London. The floors are painted the sort of, brushed out with like a whitewash. The walls, as you can see, are white, the ceilings are white, and all the light glows from these light sort of filters above. Now, all of this adds up to a space that is simultaneously pretending to be invisible and is deeply visible. We can't help but understand these two objects without understanding their relationship to the gallery, to the fact that this is the Saatchi Gallery, to the fact that this is in London. There is nothing innocent or invisible about the white cube. Now, what we have to deal with today is the fact that these gallery spaces are spaces that we understand through our computer screens. And I've asked you to all spend time navigating your way around and through the walls of the gallery. And what I want you to do this week is to go online and take some screen grabs like this. Take screen grabs that start to reflect the kinds of images that O'Doherty was taking in his book, so that we can sort of gather a virtual collection of images that match these, or don't have to directly match them, that give us a sense of the fact that in these virtual galleries, what's been replicated is still the spaces of the white wall, is still the spaces of the gallery itself, as much as it is of the objects. This is, I think, hilarious. This is the Gagosian Gallery in New York. And again, we've got the white walls, the white skylights, the white lights, but the floor, the concrete floor, has been polished to such an extent that every object has its own mimetic opposite. So everything is imitated in reflection beneath itself. So we can't help but read this exhibition of Picasso works as part of the history of the museum and of the museum objects. We start to, and even in a work like this, start to focus on the spaces in between things, on the spaces in between the artworks, on the types of arrangements and stories that are told by the gallery space itself. Or here in the, what was the Anna Schwartz Gallery, which was an area in Carriage Works in Sydney, where the art objects themselves sit inside, again, a polished white space, but the roof is left open, so we still have the industrial environment and the sense that the white cube has been placed inside the environment that is both trying to pretend to not be an art gallery and is also the aestheticized history of that place and of Sydney itself. Or works like this one by Sciota that use the structures of the art gallery, the white cubes of the art gallery, to actually incorporate them inside the work, so that the staircase and balcony starts to feel as if it is part of the very installation itself. And the structuring of the light enables us to both imagine that we are in a clean and pure art gallery space and also ignore the broader spaces around us. Or here at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney, this is an exhibition, this is a work I think from last year's National, where some lines, again, following on from Duchamp, from Ireland, this kind of idea that to install just a single line inside a space shifts the boundaries and understandings of that space. And it's always interesting to see and look at how people behave and move inside these spaces as well. What O'Doherty wants us to pay attention to is the way that the light falls onto the walls and not onto the artworks, that the pillars themselves become features in the space. All of these things are part of our experience of art and the way that we start to read and understand the work. So that when we shift from these physical explorations to these virtual explorations like you have been doing, we start to see and understand something different. But the thing that makes it feel familiar, the thing that makes it feel like we're going to step inside an art gallery, are the things that are not just the art objects, but they're all the other things. So these are some screen grabs I took last night. And what I'm interested in is you doing the same thing. See what you can find. See if you can find the reflection of the Google Street camera in the floor of the gallery. See if you can find the plastic chairs, the air conditioning units, the fire hydrants. And then think about what the artworks, how the artworks are having to compete with all of this, with the white lines that are drawn carefully around them, with the sprinkler systems, the placement between the art object and the caption. All of these things are to do with the gallery and the way we understand how the gallery works. In this image, you can actually see the Google camera reflected in the photographs themselves. So our experience of the art gallery right now is one that is informed even more so by these structures that O'Doherty was telling us about in the 1970s. It's as if we've returned to the sense of the white cube because we are unable to enter it. Because we're unable to go into the white cube, we hold on to it and go, yes, this is what an art gallery is, I remember. What I want to introduce you to now is that the way that contemporary art continues to deconstruct and challenge the white cube. And again, I'm taking us to the Turbine Hall at the Tate Modern. It's becoming a bit of a theme. This work by Doris Salcedo in 2007 called Shibboleth was a magical work. It's a work that arrived overnight. So people were in the Tate Turbine Hall one day, the next day they returned and there was a giant crack in the floor. The crack in the floor went the whole length of the Turbine Hall, so down the slope and across the floor. And no one knew or was told or would tell how the crack appeared and also how deep it was. Now the work, the crack in the foundation of the museum, is obvious. It's challenging the boundaries of the museum, but it's also doing a little bit more than that. A shibboleth is a particular kind of word. It's a word that's used to test. It's a test that detects people from another district or country by their pronunciation. Something that as a New Zealander in Australia I'm deeply aware of. You're constantly testing me and understanding or trying to understand me because of the way that I pronounce words. But a shibboleth is also a particular word from a cultural group that might be difficult for foreigners to pronounce correctly. So it's also a way of separating one people from another. For Salcedo, the shibboleth is a token of power. It gives one the power to judge, the power to refuse, but also to eliminate. And she's very particularly interested in the violence that might occur inside the museum if some people are included and other people are excluded. So for her, the shibboleth fractures the concrete floor, fractures the foundations of the museum. Now, why would an artist want to do this? It's as if she's been invited into the spaces of, one of the greatest museums on the planet, and then she says, yes, but your museum is broken and I'm going to shatter it further. What she's interested in and wanting people to respond to is the fact of the history of the Tate Modern itself, which is that the museum itself ignores its own colonial and imperial history. She says the history of racism has run parallel to the history of modernity and is the untold dark side to the history of the museum. She says that within the museum, many artists are not represented. That the picture of modernity that is told here is one that excludes more than it includes. So she says the Tate Modern's collection is itself, it presents to the world as an exclusively European event in which the self-cultivation of the human mind through the exercise of reason creates this homogeneous, rational and beautiful society. So what she's doing is critiquing the very structure of the museum from inside the museum. So this is the counter to Terry Smith. This is in fact the contemporary and the museum together. It's founded inside the crack. Now if you go to the Tate Modern today, there is still a remnant of this crack in the floor. Most of it has been filled in. In the time that the exhibition was up, and the time that the crack was present in the floor, over about 3 months, a number of people managed to fall into the crack. And it was never revealed during the time of the exhibition how it was made. You can have a look online, and there's a few documents now on how this crack was actually placed into the floor of the museum. I'm not sure how you fall into this, but anyway, people managed to. Okay, so let's return finally to what our concerns are with at the moment in terms of the contemporary art, in terms of art galleries, curation, museum spaces, the challenge to that, and also to how you might place all of this together in your own virtual exhibition. So what was to be a centrepiece of our subject this year was the Biennale of Sydney. The Biennale of Sydney has had to go online, like everything. And what they're starting to do is to start to bring out some virtual walkthroughs and virtual stories of the exhibitions that are currently still up on Cockatoo Island. And just today, because it is Earth Day, they released a walkthrough and exploration of Lucas Eileen and Kim Williams's project, Plastic Free Biennale. You can see the building that their work is in, and you can immediately see that this is not a white cube, that in fact they're occupying a space that challenges the boundaries of the structures of the gallery, and instead takes the artwork into a different kind of space and a different set of thoughts and ideas. The links are here, and I'd really recommend you go through the virtual tour of their work before Kim talks with you next week. The Biennale are also releasing a series of learning resources online. These are coming slowly. They're unfolding week by week, so we need to keep on top of them and pay attention to them. And these will also add to this kind of questioning and challenge of what the museum space is, but also how we operate within it. So please make some time to go and have a look at these. The best one so far is this really wonderful walk through the Biennale as it is staged at the Museum of Contemporary Art. The walkthrough includes introductions, virtual images, stories. Where are we? Here. If we go into it, we get not just the artists on the galleries at different levels of the galleries, but we get a great introduction from Brooke Andrew. So there's video discussions there. We get to walk through and around the spaces. We get to hear from the artists themselves, as well as having these virtual walk rounds, their exhibition installation. Okay, so I really strongly recommend that you can look at these works in 3D. You can look at them in terms of the way that the artists are presenting them. Now what this does is it gives us the artist's ideal of what the exhibitions look like. And again, I want you to challenge this, and I want you to think about how this both relies on the structure of the white cube and also deconstructs the structure of the white cube. Okay, thank you everyone. I know that was a lot of stuff this week, but hopefully it all kind of joins together and makes sense for you. Okay, see you.